There's recording. Thank you so much, Maggie. That would have been fun. An hour interview. Oh my gosh. All right. So everyone sees a recording prompt, right? Right. Can someone send me a closed caption prompt, please, or request? All right. So hopefully you should see captions. Not sure if you do. All right, I'll start sharing now. Perfect. Share. Slideshow. Can everyone see the slides? Yay. Okay. Great. And Emily will be our wonderful tracker of the Q&A. She's been keeping that document going since the start. So we will be posting that sometime soon. But Emily, I'm hoping, I forgot to ask you this, but I'm hoping you could also kind of keep track of chat while we're going through this. If there are any questions that pop up, can you just interrupt?
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Okay, so we changed it up a bit. We were supposed to do 6, 10, and 11. We moved it around the schedule. And today we're actually going to be talking about BPS 4 and 5. Hold on a second. All right. So on today's agenda, we'll answer all of these questions. And if you have any additional questions, please put them in the chat or just raise your hand. Hopefully we'll see the icon, or just unmute yourself and say, hey, I have a question. No big deal. We do have a lot of information to go through, so I'll make sure we stay on track, but just know that we will generate the Q&A document like I told you. And make that document available to all through the Healthy Families website, the password protected end. Also, we're recording this, so it'll be available to anyone who needs to see it, wants to see it afterwards. And as you already know, the slides will be shared also on the website. So the most important part of today is this reminder. It's from Angela Davis, Radical Self-Care. Anyone who is interested in making change in the world also has to learn how to take care of herself, himself, theirselves. It means that we are able to bring our entire selves into the movement. It means a holistic approach. So, as we move through this process and some of our programs transition to the child welfare protocol, and some of you mentor new programs in our system, and we take on a million other responsibilities as we get ready for the accreditation process, we know that there's a lot of stress. We all are compelled to do this work for similar reasons, namely wanting to help new parents relish in their role and provide a loving and nurturing environment for their babies. This work is hard. This work is taxing. However, the benefits are vast. Therefore, in order to survive this marathon, we must engage in radical self-care. So, what is radical self-care? Nicolini defined radical self-care as an imperative practice to resist pressures to comply, conform, and above all, to remain true to our authentic selves. Radical self-care involves embracing practices that keep us physically and psychologically healthy and fit, making time to reflect on what matters to us, challenging ourselves to grow, and checking ourselves to ensure that what we are doing aligns with what matters to us. We consider this self-care radical because it fundamentally alters how we make choices about allocating time, money, and energy for ourselves personally at home and at work, and seeks to revolutionize our workplace practices. Practice faithfully. Radical self-care involves owning and directing our lives and choosing with whom, how, and how often we engage in our nested, interconnected worlds so that we can be unapologetically ourselves in the face of unrelenting pressure and expectations to be otherwise. Right? So just a reminder to take care of ourselves. So we've already worked our way through March. Yay, check, check, check. We have a couple of updates to the timeline, and this updated timeline has already been uploaded to the Healthy Families New York website. As a reminder, all recording slides and soon-to-be QA documents can be found under the Accreditation tab under the password-protected side of our website. And we have added some new due dates for the self-study, as we can see here, here, and here, but we'll talk about those next. So the new timelines, well, here they are. Originally, we had everyone handing in their self-study by 9:15, but we wanted to try, well, namely, thanks to conversations with the PCMs, we wanted to align your writing of the ASR because a lot of it is also pieces that need to be incorporated into the self-study. We wanted to align your due date with the due date of your ASR. So for July contracts, your new due date is 9/15/2023, and the ASR you'll be using is your 22-23 ASR. And for quarterlies, you'll be using your Q4 quarterlies. For September, your new due date is October 15th, 2023. It's the same date parameters as July's. For October, your new due date is November 1st, 2023. Again, same ASR and quarterly dates as July and September. And December is where things change up a little bit. So your self-study is due October 15th, 2023. And your ASR will be your 21-22 ASR, and you'll be using Q3 quarterlies. So please note that December contracts will need to update your 21-22 ASR to better represent the requirements of the BPS 8th edition. July, September, and October contracts, you'll be using the new ASR guidelines, which are already rewritten to better align with the BPS 8.3 edition. Okay, so we have a staggered due date schedule, and there'll be a group of CA folks reviewing those, so you'll get feedback on what needs to change. So let's talk about BPS 4 and 5. So BPS 4 generally is about offering services intensely. So in terms of the self-study, what you need to include are 4 policies, which have the red checks, which means they're done, and 2 reports, 4.2b and 4.3b. So at this point, you're 67% complete with BPS 4, which feels nice, right? Now, BPS 5 is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It consists of 3 policies, which just went out this week, and a couple of narratives and an equity plan. So you're 0% complete on this, and this is your first essential standard in your self-study. All right, so as a reminder, an essential standard has to be met, okay? So let's focus on BPS 4 right now. Again, reminder, offering services intensely. And this is the breakdown. You have your 3 policies where your site offers weekly home visits at onset. For 2, you're talking about your levels of service. For 3A, families offered services a minimum of 3 years after enrollment or birth. And then you have for 2B, for 4A, families planning to close services have a transition plan. And then you have evidence for the practice with 42B, report on levels of services, and 43B, a report on families being offered services a minimum of 3 years after enrollment. Please note that for 42B, HFNY has a policy. It's not a requirement of HFA, but we do have a policy. So 41A is about these components, offering weekly visits at the start of services and weekly continued until progress is met. These components are already part of the policy effective as of August 2022. You have already drafted and approved procedures for BPS-4. Therefore, all you need to do is double check to be 100% sure your procedures match a 2 rating for each of the policies for BPS-4. HFNYCA made sure all policies were written to include all necessary components to be scored in. And just as a reminder, policies have no 3 rating for HFA. These policies are tracked in your site visit, and how else do you keep track of it? Right? So always have that question in consideration. Here are the HFNY site-specific procedure guidelines for 41A. So these are the procedures as per the finalized policy that HFNY released. In reviewing these procedures, do your policies cover all of the above? If they've been approved by your PCM, they should, but it's always okay to double and triple check, right? Give it a little time to look at them through. All right, another policy here. Please note that we have a bolded item, so we'll talk about that in a bit. But 402, the policy and procedure specify the following: define service levels, the requirement of HFA level change forms, process for reviewing family progress and involvement of family, FSS, and supervisors in the discussions. So the bolded item maps onto practice 42C, which is a site visit item and an essential item. So a reminder, it's a site visit item, which means only 35% of our programs will have to provide proof of meeting 42C. However, the sooner all of our programs start incorporating this requirement into practice and uploading your forms into the MIS, the sooner you will all be meeting the standard. Okay. And this is tracked in, the policy is tracked in your site visits. And these are all of the procedures that HFNY has for 42A. So your policy should describe all of these 8 bullets. So do your policies cover all of the above? Again, they should if they're approved by your PCM. However, always review them. Now, as I talked about earlier in the last slide, focus on the blue. 42C is an essential standard. So the HFA level change forms and the HFA celebration certificates need to be uploaded to case documents in the MIS and describe how the site will provide monitoring to ensure the certificates are signed by the appropriate parties and uploaded to case documents. So that's a change, and that is something that, again, will be looked at for any and all programs that will go through the site visit. Okay. So here's the proof. Remember that there is an HFNY policy for 42B that is not required by HFA. For this policy, programs provide specific procedures related to the description and documentation of home visit goals, supervisor approval for out-of-home and virtual visits, so that its frequency, their location, and the reason for those out-of-home visits, documentation of discussion of strategies to move families from out-of-home to in-home visits, agency policy and procedures regarding supervised visits and foster care or PC1 incarceration. So for this standard, you want to show proof that your practice meets the standard. And what you have to show is that 75% of families receive at least 75% of home visits based on their service level. And again, this is for a rating of 2. So this is tracked in your ASR, your site visit, and your quarterlies. And you also see them in the performance indicators, right? So how else are you keeping track of this? What is needed for a 2, again, this is all extra information that are in the standards. So HFA notes that this is a threshold standard, meaning that to be in adherence, a minimum threshold has been established of 75% in this case. And if you don't meet this threshold, peer reviewers or a panel will request more recent data. So we'll be getting more clarity with HFA about what these threshold standards mean, and what the request for more recent data actually means. HFA also encourages that you set goals or benchmarks when home visit completion rates fall below the 75% threshold. And they also suggest that supervision time is used to focus on exceptions, reasons, problem-solving strategies to increase completion rates. So again, this ties back to the CQI requirement that HFA now has. So there's a lot of information here, but this is found at the back of the BPS-4. You know, for every standard, there's these documentation requirements for your self-study. So what is required for 42B is a report for the most recent quarter, okay, which includes all of this information, and we'll be walking through this right now. So MIS, thankfully, thanks to CHSR, thanks to the MIS, we actually have 2 reports. One that provides a summary, which is pretty much, are you meeting the standard? And it breaks it down a bit. Then we have the details. So this is the summary report and the detailed report. Now, for all of you, this is totally familiar, but it never hurts to review things. So here's MIS. Can you see that okay? Okay. So this is me logged into MIS. I open it, I hit reports, and then what I like to do is filter. So in this screenshot, I've already filtered out everything but the accreditation reports. So as you can see, down here, we have 3 pages of accreditation reports, and 3 of the reports are for standard 4. So here's the first one, and the next page, you'll see the next one. If you want to, you can also type into the search bar 4-2, and you should get whatever reports are available for 4-2 that are titled 4-2. Right? Many of these reports come with report documentation, as you can see, a little page. And this is a PDF that provides a lot of valuable information. We will see an example of this in a minute, and then you have your Run Report button. So these are the other 2 reports. Again, all the same information has been circled. And this is the report documentation I was talking about. So here is the example for the summary of 42B. It has detailed information on the purpose and description of the report at the very top, the cohort used, so the people, the group of people, the group of participants used to run the report, the type of date range available, so whether you can plug in dates, whether you can run it by quarters. So my understanding, and if anyone from CHSR is out there, my understanding is that your quarters are tied into your contract date. All right. So the type of worker and program filters that are available for this report too. So FSS, FRS supervisors, and sometimes program filters are available for certain types of categories. So some of you who will be doing child welfare protocol, you will likely have a filter available for some data. And then a summary indicating the BPS score breakdown, in addition to a bunch of other information. All right, but I don't want to get into the weeds here. Just know that if you see the title of the report and it has a little document, you can click on that and you'll have a ton of information available to you. So we'll run the summary report first. Notice that quarters are not preset, all right? You have to plug in a start date and an end date.
There's some
Right?
questions in the chat if you have a second.
Sure.
There was one question asking if the benchmark goals can that are used, can we use Walter's CQI to provide this evidence?
Okay. For the benchmark goals, can we use the work we do with Walter CQI to provide the evidence? Do you mean the work that you're doing right now with Walter, instead of focusing on service plans, you're doing, you choose this, or do you want to do both?
I asked that question, Pariah. I'm just wondering, because we have these forms that Walter gave us to do our, our planning, and that seems to be very organized, so not just for the family service plan, but if we are going to need to set up some benchmarks that we are, as we go and work through our self-study, I don't know, it seems to me like a natural flow that those forms will give us the structure, but I just want to get clarification and yay or nay.
Yeah, and Walter's here today, so he can definitely pipe in, but I would say any tools, any forms that you're given that you find helpful, yeah, use them. Use them for whatever you need. I'm not sure that a formal CQI project will be needed for anything you're not meeting the benchmark for, because I think that may be a bit overwhelming, but I will leave that question to be answered by either Walter, Kristen, whoever would like to provide a bit more feedback on that.
Esther, I would say that those forms are really to kind of guide you as you're working forward and propel your CQI projects forward. You will be able to use those forms as evidence that you're doing a CQI project, and we'll show you in the April workshop how you can enter those into the MIS to get credit for that.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Of course.
And Trina, are you saying that we need to include these report documentations in our individual SAT? Yes. So you will run the report, and then in SharePoint, you'll see a folder for BPS 4, and you will label this BPS 4.2 report. Does that answer your question, Trina?
I was wondering if we were supposed to put the explanation of what the report is showing.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No, no, I wouldn't. Any other questions? No? Okay. So back to the summary. So we have a start date. I plugged in the most recent 3 months. So January to March, all right? And I also want you to recall that you as a program are tracked on this information in various ways. So we'll talk about it a little bit. In the site visit, this is checked. So when your PCM comes to you or you schedule your Zoom site visit, this is checked for the most recent 3 months prior to your site visit. In your quarterlies, you track this for every quarter based on your contract year. In the performance indicators, this is tracked by fiscal year. So April 1st through September 30th, and then October 1st through March 31st. And in your ASR, you provide a narrative to explain this performance indicator result based on the most recent PIs available before your ASR is due. All right, so 4.2 is tracked a lot. And like I said, here I plugged in the most recent 3 months. However, when I actually ran the report, I used a different time span because it's still so early in the month. We know that folks are still entering data. So here's what we see, hopefully. There you go. Here's a report. This is a summary report you will see for your program when you run it. As you can see, this report indicates if you miss the standard. So here is a 2. Here is your key code, let's say. And a 1 is because you're under 75%. A 2 is if you are between 75 and 90%. And a 3 is 90 or greater. All right, so here we see that this program is meeting the standard, right? And as you can see, the period I used was October 1st, 2022 until the end of the year. And this report is for 6 workers. And I also want you to notice this. There's a worker at 76% and another worker at 67%. So one is just meeting the standard and another one is very close to meeting the standard. So this is something you may want to monitor, something you may want to discuss in supervision to better support these individual workers, right? So what feeds this? Well, the detailed report provides us with a little bit more context to understand what's going on in the summary, okay? So the tables of documentation and standards for 4 indicate that pre-site documentation, so the tables of documentation in the BPS 8.3, indicate that pre-site documentation for 4.2b should include a home visit completion report for the most recent quarter and includes all active FSSs. So I'm going to flip quickly. So here we have all active FSSs. Here we see that there's 6. Level of service per family. So here in this detail, you have the level per service for the family, okay? The level changes in that quarter, the expected and actual home visits, and then the visit rate, which is the combination of expected and actual home visits. All right. So this is the report that gives you all of the home visit of HV, home visitor times PCID, home visitor and their families. So luckily, Math Time, MIS does all of this behind the scenes. They do the completed visits divided by expected visits, the count of the total number of active families, which is these here, 18 cases used for this report, right? And this subtracts any families who are on creative outreach for the entire quarter. So they're not counted in this report. They count the number of active families who received at least 75% of expected home visits, right? So you see that here at the bottom. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. And program home visit count is taken by each worker's count of families that received 75% of expected home visits divided by the number of families who were on CO the entire quarter. So remember, MIS has done all of that work for us. Oh, I keep doing that. I apologize. Just want you to note that for this report, you can filter by worker and run individual reports for each of your workers, or you can run it for all staff and get a 16-page report like I did for this example. We are getting clarity from HFA to see if we need to include this summary report in the self-study. So if we do, I suggest that you run it for all as opposed to running a separate report for each staff member. So running reports for each staff member could be really useful during supervision, like having that report in front of you. But for the sake of, including it in the self-study, if you need to, my understanding is you don't need to include this detailed report in any of the HFNY requirements. But if you happen to need it for HFA, again, we'll get clarity on that, then just run all. And just remember that MIS does all this for you. So what is needed for policy 43A? This one I say we've got in the bag. So just make sure your policy is spotless and covers all the guidance and the best practice standards and the HFNY procedures guidelines. All right. Again, this is tracked in your site visit. So what is needed as per HFNY, describing how the program will ensure that all families are made aware at the time of enrollment that services are offered through age 5. So the minimum for HFNY is age 3. So like I said, we got this in the bag. All right. And the proof that we're offering these services. So what HFA is looking for is, again, some kind of indication where they can see that each family is able to participate in the program for 36 or more months. The report for that is 43B, participant in program for at least 3 years as of today. And we run 43B. So this is a screenshot of only the first 10 families for this program. This report is about 15 pages long for this program and has information for all families enrolled in the program for at least 3 years since the inception of this report or the program, right? So you have that detail up in the title, and you can see that you have folks who've been intaked in 2001, 2016, and you see the months in the program. And these all exceed 36 months. So we're good. So what is needed for a 2 for 44A? Here we have all of the 9 things that you would need in your policy. Again, HFNY, when writing the policy, they made sure that they were meeting all of these criteria. So what you need to do is make sure that your procedures match. And here are the site-specific procedures and guidelines for 44A as per HFNY. So your procedures should have details around determining when formal transitions should take place and ensure that this is documented in MIS. Should have details around supporting families around loss. It should have details around identifying service providers in their new communities, so service providers for the families. Details around consent process to conduct referrals. Details around documenting home visitor and supervisor conversations about the transition and ensuring this is captured in the supervision notes. And also documentation assuring that family has followed up with identified resources. Right? So that is all we have for BPS 4. Again, just as a reminder, a lot of BPS 4 are policies. HFNY writes the policies, making sure that it meets all of the criteria in the HFA best practice standards for those policies. It creates procedures procedural guidelines for all of you to write your procedures. So you are also meeting that rating of 2. So just make sure that you double check your policy to align it with these procedures. And for the most part, I would say they are aligned because you have already received approval from your PCM. Okay. So now we have the privilege of having Maggie walk us through BPS 5. Maggie, just let me know when you want me to click over.
All right. Yeah, BPS 5 is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as Claudia mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the finalized HFNY policies went out on Monday, and you all are in the process of now creating your procedures. So what do we include in the self-study for 5? We have 3 policies, so policies related to 5.1a, 5.2a, and 5.3a. And then we have 2 narratives and your equity plan under 5.4. And then Claudia, you can, oh, yep. So for standard 5.1a, to achieve a 2 rating, sites must have policy and procedures which include community agreements or team commitments regarding expectations for staff interactions and professional development and supervision expectations that ensure staff have the resources needed to continually strengthen their relational skills. And Claudia, if you want to go forward. Here are the HFNY site-specific procedures under 5.1a. For this policy, the procedures are broken down into 3 categories related to staff interactions, staff professional development needs, and skill development and supervision. When we were creating these policies for our system, we recognized that some of the expectations in Standard 5 are closely related to other standards. And then in one way, central administration was really attempting to streamline and simplify this policy was by embedding some of its requirements into other policies where they're most relevant. So for 5.1a, that meant incorporating the procedures related to professional development and supervision into policies 11.4, which is your ongoing training, and 12.2a, which is administrative, clinical, and reflective supervision and professional development support, rather than having these procedures specifically incorporated under 5. You'll see in 11.4, which you guys are working on right now, there is a procedure specifically talking about 5.1a, and when 12.2a comes out, you'll see that as well. That we really nod to that of like, hey, here's where you're meeting this, but it's under this more relevant policy. The biggest ask in 5.1a for each program is this ask around each program collaboratively developing its own community agreements or team commitments. And then if you want to move forward, Claudia, thank you. So what are community agreements? The National Equity Project defines agreements as an aspiration or collective vision for how we want to be in relationship to one another. They are explicitly developed and enforced by the group, not an external authority, and as such must represent consensus. So when we're thinking about community agreements, these are really different from norms or rules because they require intentional and conscious awareness of how we behave in relationship to each other. And they're not mandated or enforced by an external authority Instead, they really require the will and the buy-in of the group. The intent of having programs develop community agreements is really about each program staff coming together to establish shared expectations for how staff will work together and interact with one another based on the unique culture and values that exist among staff members. These community agreements are an opportunity for your teams to be intentional in creating safe and supportive spaces in supervision, in team meetings, and in peer-to-peer interactions, which will enable a greater likelihood for honest, respectful, and brave conversations. So, sorry. So developing community agreements. There are many ways you can approach developing community agreements. Some things that are important to remember is that this will look different for every program. Every program has its unique staff, it has unique ways you guys like to work together, and that will be reflected in the community agreements you create. Another important thing to remember is that you know your staff best. How you approach this process should be based on how you know your team prefers to engage in collaborative work. And then the final thing is that how we interact with our peers models how relationships should be, and that program culture will shape the relationships your home visitors build between themselves and their families. The underlying intent here with 5.1a is really modeling that parallel process. If we can create safe and supportive environments in our programs for staff to engage with each other, home visitors will be able to create safe and supportive relationships with their families to engage in that partnership. And then, so I included some ideas for facilitating this process. Again, this will look different for every program, but if you are wondering, how do I really start this conversation? Some ideas could be, using some independent reflection, whether that's, a journal prompt and having people write down ideas, or just saying, hey, we're going to talk about this. Go home and think about what this means for you. And so we can come back and really have that conversation. It could be using existing community agreements as a template or a jumping off point. So taking a couple lists, HFA has a ton of them on their network resources page, and saying, what jumps out to you, or what do we think isn't relevant for our team, or where do we see that things are missing that we want to add to our list that we're creating? You could just facilitate an open discussion. We're working on community agreements. What does that mean to you? What does that look like for you? And just talk with your team about that. Or you could do a mixed method. You could take any of these ideas, and have multiple ways you're approaching this for whatever works best for folks on your staff.
So Maggie, Esther has a question, and it's, so these community agreements are not MOUs, correct?
No. Yes, these community agreements are really just shared commitments to one another around what do we want it to look like when we work together collaboratively, and what do we want it to feel like when we're in situations where exchanging ideas and thinking out loud around things that we might feel differently about, and how do you establish that safe and supportive environment so that everyone feels like they can engage with the team. They're not, no, they're not. So it's not like an MOU. It's really about you guys collaborating with each other as a team.
All right, so I just to be 100% clear, Maggie, this is basically the old-fashioned way of collecting staff input, right? That just like old Standard 5 used to be a lot about getting feedback from the team, collecting staff input, satisfaction surveys, and all of that. And 8.3 has this new language of equity and everything. So, which makes it a little different. So is this kind of like the fancy term for staff input and feedback?
So there is a component of 5.1 around gathering staff input and feedback, but this piece around community agreements or team commitments is really about being intentional about setting up a shared understanding among yourselves and among your staff for how you guys are going to work together. So it's really more, I wish I had an example. I should have included one.
I have an example.
Oh,
I
go
have an
ahead,
example
Claudia.
too.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
did some.
Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
Trina.
Please,
Yeah,
Trina.
great.
So, yeah, this team is amazing. They came up with these, like, so they're very simple. Like the first one is assume that everybody is well-intended. And the next one was, if you have a need that is not being met, ask or, you know, make a statement about it, tell somebody. The third one is respect everyone's workload. And if you unsure, ask permission. Those are our four, something similar to that. I don't have it right in front of me, but they came up with these as things that, you know, would serve all of us. So I didn't even understand it, but I was like, why do we, you know, this is the one place we can kind of be safe with each other, but that's kind of taking it for granted that it is. So with these things posted on the wall, then that seems like a good way to go forward, because we all know them. It's not just assumed we know them.
Yeah, exactly, Trina. And I see in the chat you said you used like a team meeting to come up with these. Do you want to share just a little bit about like what that process looked like for your team?
We did. It was just, you know, I brought this to, when we review the draft of the policy, I brought this together and said, you know, let's talk about what this actually means. And they just came up with these ideas. So I think we started with, so everybody mentioned that they felt comfortable with whatever they say in the room, or if they, you know, somebody wants music off or wants it on, they talk to each other. So we just kind of jumped off from what's already happening in the office. And we went from there. So if somebody said, you know, if I'm not sure, I ask somebody. So that became one of our agreements.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for providing that insight to how your team did this. That's really great.
And some folks are saying, are there examples? Yes, there are examples. HFA provides some guidance on developing, and Joe has included the link there, and I believe it's also linked in the best practice standards. So you'll see those hyperlinks if you pull up a digital version of your PDF digital version of your best practice standards. We also have some examples from our REACH committee, our Racial Equity and Cultural Humility committee, so we can definitely share those. But one, I just can't get this example out of my head. Based on core training, we always do the value exercise, right? When you go to FSS core, and FSSs are encouraged to do the value exercise. And that is a process that can get you started on getting some of these agreements framed. So, you know, what are your values? How do you rate them? You know, what are your top three? And then how do you come together to honor each other's values? So Trina, maybe that's why your staff is like on it, because they feel like they do that on a regular basis with families.
Can I also
I
add
think that
another?
might be true. Yeah.
I thought that was a great idea about using the values activity as a way. Another possible activity that I know comes up in FSS core, I'm not sure about Frog, is the Trust Builders, Trust Busters, where you just explore what are examples that that represent building trust, and what are behaviors or characteristics that do the opposite, that interfere with trust. And then that could be a nice stepping stone to exploring what is it that you need to be in the community agreement, because ultimately it's to make sure that everyone feels included and feels respected and feels that they have a voice.
Thank you, Isabel. And Esther, someone's asking, can you talk a little bit about what a Mohawk agreement is?
Yes, maybe some of our friends here in the call can also speak to it, but some of us in Healthy Families New York attended some workshops, maybe a year ago or maybe 2 years ago now, where we had it was more into the Native American community kind of cultural diversity training. But at the beginning of these sessions, we heard the speaker saying, okay, let's develop this agreement right now before we get started, to create a sense of safety or a safe space for everybody to be able to discuss these topics that can be sensitive and maybe hurtful to some, and because of the trauma that we were getting ready to see through videos and different things that we were about to talk about. So these agreements, and I don't have it in front of me because I'm not in my office desk, but it is a wonderful agreement where it tells, we agree to not take things personal when we're talking about a topic, and we're going to stay focused. When we agree to treat each other with respect, we agree to not raise our voices, and we agree to this and that. So it has several agreements, but it's such a peaceful way of presenting how you should kind of view a lot of the times that you come into a meeting without getting excited or overwhelmed. And, it makes it feel a little bit more peaceful, So I will share it with you guys. I will send it to Claudia, and then she can share it with everybody.
And I ask all of you who are just putting all of these wonderful resources, we'll do our best to pull the links from the meeting chat. But if you think about other resources from now until whenever, just feel free to send them to me, okay? And I think if we create a whole list of things, it could be useful. And Trina, I want to really elevate what you said, because I thought it was so important. The fact that we often come into this assuming that trust and safety is embedded in our interactions with each other. So I think it's really important to consider that maybe it's not, and maybe we need to have a more explicit conversation of what we as individuals require to feel safe and heard, and how we can bridge all of our needs for those for feeling safe and feeling heard, and create this kind of set of community agreements. And just because I feel like the word community might be a little confusing because folks are asking about these MOUs, what this really is getting at is that your program in and of itself, you and your home visitors and your supervisors and everyone that is involved in your HFNY program on a day-to-day basis is a community. Okay, you are a smaller embedded community within the bigger community of HFNY. That's why there's that level of flexibility for all of you to develop your own agreements, understanding that each program has its own culture, right? And we have a ton of this chat is exploding, so I thank you all. I think there's a lot of thanks and a lot of sharing of resources. So another suggestion for all of you, again, we will try our best to compile them, but if my understanding is there should be a little ellipse that you can see in your chat, so the 3 dots, At the ends of this, you can click on those three dots and there should be a prompt that comes up that says save chat, right? But again, we'll be compiling this. So thank you. Maggie, I will switch your slide now.
Awesome. All right, so shifting to 5.2a. So what is needed to achieve a 2 rating for 5.2a is that the site has policy or written guidance describing its intention and expectations for family partnership that honors diverse family structures, seeks inclusivity in all aspects of work, and elevates family voice. Claudia, if you can click ahead. The good news with 5.2a is that you're already doing a lot of this. Partnering with families is really the bread and butter of the HFA model, and this is something that we know we really do well in our program. In the Healthy Families New York site-specific procedures, for the most part, what you're being asked to do is just describe what you're already doing. So you're being asked to describe how your staff is trained and oriented to your intention and expectations for engaging with families, and to describe, how you use those reflective strategies and reflective practices to learn about families' unique cultures right from the beginning of services. And you're asked to describe the complaint and grievance process and what that looks like for families related to their interactions for staff. And we all know that those are things that you're already doing. And then you're also asked to talk about, what are the mechanism your site uses to gather feedback from families, particularly related to these issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or, access to services that might be impacting families in your community. And then again, here for 5.2a, we have professional development and supervision procedures that are embedded into other policies. So for the most part, you're just talking about how your program approaches this partnering with families and what that looks like for your program. And now 5.3a. In 5.3a, the focus shifts from the highlighting staff interactions and interactions between staff and families to thinking more about the community. In order to achieve a 2 rating, each site must have a policy or other written guidance that reflects how it advocates at the community level and with its community advisory board to identify and address existing barriers, to increase equitable access to services, to ensure diverse representation in staff and materials, and to meet the cultural and language needs of staff and family. Claudia, you want to? So first, we just want to recognize that the idea of an expectation around programs advocating at the community level can feel intimidating, but that it's important to remember that HFA isn't looking for your program on its own to achieve systematic or community-wide change. What they are looking for is that your program considers what it learns from the work you're doing, what it learns from your staff and your families, in order to identify barriers that are faced by those served and employed by your program, and to really be the voice that acknowledges and informs your community advisory board partners and your other organizational partners who might have greater power or greater leverage within your community to really make those changes that reduce those barriers or, get rid of them entirely. So it's really just about being the voice that raises those issues to other organizations and other partners that you interact with in your community. And then, so with this in mind, with the 5.3a expectations, again, CA really wanted to do all that it could to streamline these requirements under 5 into the work that you guys are already doing. And for that purpose, much of the effort required to meet 5.3 is embedded into your ASR and into your quarterly reports. So with 5.3a, your ASR and equity plan really lay the groundwork and set you up to think about what story your program and community data, as well as the feedback you gather from staff and families, is telling about the issues related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and the barriers to equitable access that exist in your community and how they impact your staff and service population. And in the updated ASR guidelines, when they're released, you'll see that in each section and under each program area, there are going to be guiding questions that really probe you to think about how the data and how the program area is related to these issues and how you can think about some of what you're looking at in terms of these questions about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in your community. Your efforts to identify, acknowledge, and affect change where possible will be tracked in your quarterly reports. So in your ASR, you'll identify what you've learned, and in your quarterly reports, you'll share, what did you share with your community advisory board? How did you share what you learned with other community partners? And what was the feedback you heard? And if you identify service barriers that exist for your own program, how did you work to address these? And this could mean increasing language capacity among your staff. It could mean filling vacancies. It could mean working to increase a certain population with your community that you've recognized you struggle to engage in program services. It could mean addressing where your materials or curriculum don't align with appropriate language or cultural needs. So there's a lot of things that you might be able to see, where can I grow in our program's capacity to meet these needs that are in your control? And then how can you be a voice that elevates some of the things you identify from your work and your data and your families and your staff to other partners that have more of that leverage, that have more of that reach within your community. Yeah.
Thank you, Maggie.
You are welcome. Back to you.
Back to me. So now we're going to talk about that story. How do we create that story? So BPS focuses on the development of a narrative. So 5.4 is all about the narrative, all about the plan, all about the strategies, and all about bringing it back, right? So here in 5.4a, you're describing the process you use to collect feedback and develop your program's equity strategies and your most recent efforts to obtain meaningful feedback from parents and caregivers and staff. Here you should include a summary of findings. So you want to summarize patterns, you want to summarize trends, you want to summarize strengths and challenges that are specific to 5. We will see an example of this later. So in order to have a plan, you should have information that feeds this plan. And like Maggie already said, you have a ton of information. You're getting information from your quarterlies, you're getting information from your ASR, you're getting information from your site visits. So it's really about weaving all of this into a story that helps you build some strategies, identify some strategies that you'll be working on over a year. So this is really the standard that covers the narrative that talks about gathering and synthesizing information, right? So it does have a requirement of feedback directly from staff and from families. And if you want to be a superstar and get a 3 rating, then you're also getting feedback from former families and former staff. So this requirement for the staff survey is here. Doesn't mean you have to create a whole new staff survey, right? Because you already have a requirement for a staff survey in BPS 9. That requirement is for a biennial period, so every 2 years. But the equity plan also allows for what is considered anecdotal information, but we really call it qualitative information. So team meetings, what do you get out of team meetings? What are you getting out of supervisory meetings? What are staff telling you as they are doing this work that can better support them through this process? So what are staff telling you about expectations for staff interactions? What do they want? What are they telling you about their own professional development and what they expect out of supervision to really strengthen those relational skills? Right. So some questions to think about, some questions that could be added to that survey that's required for 9. Do you feel supported by your colleagues? Do you feel comfortable sharing your opinions and feelings with your team? Do you feel heard and supported by your supervisor? Do you feel your training needs are met? Are you offered training and supervision opportunities that help develop the skills you need to work with families from diverse backgrounds? Okay, these are just some examples. It also requires a family survey. So again, this isn't new. This is part of BPS GA2A or the old GA2B. But the equity plan allows for what is considered, again, anecdotal information. So here you can have smaller focus group meetings or that kind of thing. You can get the anecdotal information again from your home visitors saying, you know, we have this new cluster of families that are refugees. I don't know how to work with refugees. So how can we change our materials to better address their needs? What kind of connections do we need to make with immigration attorneys? What kind of connections do we need to make with a slew of other resources for the needs of refugee families? So again, in this, you want to make sure that you're getting information on what you need to honor diverse family structures, do you need to seek inclusivity in all aspects of work, and what helps you to elevate family voice. So possible questions for a survey in this instance is, do you feel heard and supported by your home visitor? Does your home visitor regularly follow your lead during home visits? Do you and your home visitor often talk about your strengths? Do you feel materials used during your home visits capture your family's culture and characteristics, right? And as all of you know, in terms of getting the most accurate data you can possibly get, how are you administering this? Is there the possibility, is there strict confidentiality? Could it be anonymous? Is it available in multiple languages, right? What structure do you have in place to receive this information from both staff and families? All right, so now you have all your data, right? You've summarized it. You hear what people are telling you. That's your narrative for 5-4A. Now 5-4B is the plan, right? So 5-4A is embedded within 5-4B. In 5-4B, you have the summary that incorporates input from families and staff, lessons learned. Then you have strategies based on input. So this is the plan component of the equity plan. And this is your first essential standard for your self-study, right? So to get a 2 rating, you have to have these 2 components, the summary and the strategies. If you are feeling like you want to be a superstar, then you could do a formal DEIB assessment. And some of those assessments are, some examples of those assessments are available again through the standards, are hyperlinked through the standards. Okay, so just as a reminder, this is threading information from staff and families to inform better practice. So let's review some equity plans. One thing I do want to tell you is that I know Maggie talked about the ASR kind of weaving a lot of the BPS 5 components into what you write. Healthy Families America also has a pretty decent template for your equity plan, and we as central administration have used it. I think it provides a nice kind of synopsis and structure that you can use. I suggest you use. So most of you are familiar with Babyville, the fictitious community created by HFA for all of their trainings. This is their summary of 5.4a. And as you can see here, there are some examples of questions you can actually think about including in your staff survey. So when you get the full example from Babyville, you'll see complete information on staff surveys, on family surveys, and then on other methods by which they collected data. So focus groups, meetings, that kind of thing. But I just wanted to take a quick screenshot of a portion of it, right? So some questions here that maybe you can borrow the site or statements rather, and you have a Likert scale of strongly agreeing, strongly disagreeing. The site provides training on topics that help me support the families I work with. The site provides training specific to unique characteristics of families I serve. My opinions and suggestions are as important to site leadership as other staff members. So here are some examples, okay? Now for the actual equity plan. So again, this is the summary. This covers 5.4a. 5.4a also has to be included in 5.4b. Here is the equity plan. So let's walk through it. You have describing area of opportunity for growth or improvement, right? So this is coming directly from the data you just collected. And here's the source of information. So here you can say parent survey, staff survey. Here they have focus groups. What strategies did you come up with to address this area? And what is your timeline for implementation? So let's say this is Babyville Equity Plan Sample for 2023. As the months pass for 2023, you start populating this field. So you tell us, what lessons did you learn? Are there any revisions? Is there any feedback? And you definitely provide the dates. So try to focus on the smallest. Every family should make their own choice about who to include in visits. They got this information from the focus groups. And here, the strategies that they identified that staff will discuss this in an upcoming team meeting. When scheduling the initial visit with the FSS, staff will ask the family who they'd like to include in visits. Staff will update the family QA call form to include a question asking how families are feeling about this and if there is anyone else they'd like to include in visits. And their target time for implementation is by the end of the current calendar year. Right, so this is the Babyville example. This Babyville, again, is a single site. Now here is another this is a real world example, right? This was I pulled this from the HFA resources side, and this is a multi-site system. So this is the only real world example that I could find within the HFA resources. So here they're summarizing feedback from their TAQA visits. Right, so again, this is 5.4a. So through the work from the past year, team discussions and feedback from sites, the TAQAs would like to see a continued effort to do all of these things. Okay. Now this is their equity plan. So they're using HFA's template that breaks it down to, again, areas of opportunity for growth or improvement, the source of information, the strategies to address this area, the timeline, and they have already started filling this in. Okay, so this is the work they have done towards achieving all of their goals, right, for their equity plan for that year. All right, so here, ensure that Healthy Families is effectively recruiting, engaging, and serving well Virginia families. And their source of information, as you can see, are their Healthy Families Virginia CAP, the strategic plan, advisory board feedback. And here, what they're going to do to achieve this is contract with Dialectics for a DEI assessment for HV and their services. And all central administration work and staff will participate. They'll do some pilot focus groups with McVie sites, and they hope to have this completed in the spring or summer of 2022. So their update shows that they completed the assessment, they've started the CQI process, and they're shaping their evaluation. Okay, so again, just as a reminder, this is a multi-site system, so some of the opportunities for growth or improvement are kind of really at the macro level to support multiple sites. Now, let's walk through our central administration. We have our own equity plan. Okay. And data from a variety of sources to summarize in our narrative that I will share with all of you before our next meeting inform these 5 areas we identified. So we want to expand CA's understanding about diversity, equity, and inclusion, self-awareness regarding DEI topics, and ability to advocate and support change within the HFNY multi-site system. We want to evaluate process and progress and explore new opportunities for growth to better support all programs to achieve DEI goals. We want to expand system-wide knowledge about DEI, so creating safe spaces, providing some guidance on having difficult conversation. And something that came up a lot was resources for implicit bias training. We want to evaluate existing programmatic barriers to following DEI tenets. And we want to incorporate lived experience into all staff trainings. So our core, our frog, and our transfer of learning resources. Right. So we use, like I said, the HFA template, but we wanted to make it pretty, so I chose blue. But no, it's our template actually follows the full template. So area 1, expanding CA's understanding about DEI, self-awareness regarding DEI topics, and ability to advocate and support change. Where did we get this? Well, we got it from conversations that we had during our central administration meetings, and we also got it from all of you from the CA survey that was done in 2021. So in order to address these, we identified 2 strategies. One was to have the entire CA team participate in diversity-informed tenets training and develop a continuous learning plan. The hope for this implementation is the spring of 2023. We'll probably have to tweak that because everything that's happening, including accreditation. All right, but we have identified a resource, and now we're trying to figure out the contract situation. Equity plan area 2, evaluating progress and exploring new opportunities for growth to better support all programs to achieve DEI goals. Same resources, CA feedback, This time was also our REACH feedback. So REACH, again, as a reminder, is our DEA work group, and which all of you can participate in. And also program feedback via regional meetings, right? So that's another source of information for us as a CA, and it could be for you as well, are these regional meetings where there's such a wealth of information that's shared by all of you, as is the statewide leadership meeting, okay? So our minutes pretty much serve as a source for anecdotal data. We can look through it and say, okay, this is a pattern that we're seeing. There is help being asked about this particular topic, at least for the last 2 regional meetings. This is something we should think about, right? So again, right, HFA kind of stresses, what kind of patterns are you seeing? So as we see those patterns, we think, okay, what strategy can we use to address this, right? So for this area 2, REACH committee continues meeting on a monthly basis and reviews progress towards equity goals. We identify self-assessment tool and administer tool across the entire system, analyze present findings. So for the first strategy, this is ongoing. For the second strategy, spring, summer 2023, that's going to change. And analyzing and presenting findings is tied to the, sorry, that should be a 3, is tied to the second strategy. So clearly that will change too. All right. And I'm not going to go through all of them. They will be available for you to review, but you get a sense of what's happening. So we're describing areas of opportunity for growth or improvement based off of your feedback, central administration partner feedbacks, your feedback from the CA survey, your feedback from the regional meetings, right? We're conducting listening forums, we're doing this, we're creating a repository, and again, we have timeline for implementation, right? Same for 4. And same for 5. Right? So then that gets us to 5.4c, which is, all right, the year is over. What have you done related to your equity plan? So let me flip over. It's really a discussion about the progress. So this last column. So you sit down with your staff, you review your equity plan, you have conversations about how things went, right? And you revise things as needed. So for 2, you would have to do the review with review and updating with review and updating annually with staff, and then identifying strategies that worked, some that didn't work, and tweaks to it, right? And again, your feedback. For a 3 rating, you're doing this also with your community advisory board. Right? So again, here is where you close the loop and start the process all over again. You review your progress and your identified areas of improvement with your staff, and then you update strategies based on feedback and lessons learned. So we will see how this is structured in the HFA equity template. So this is the structure for the review for Babyville. So here it says to be completed December of current year. Right, so here you would fill in lessons learned, new input from staff and families, and continue the process all over again. All right. So have any of you followed this structure for your own equity plan? All right, flipping through folks to see if anyone raised their hand, but I'm not seeing. All right. Do you have any questions about this?
Hey, Claudia, can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Just one thing, this isn't really a question, but just something I wanted to add, and I was trying to talk way back when, but I didn't realize I was on. I had to unmute myself. Just something that's really important to remind everyone is to make sure in the MIS that your current contract is and the dates of your current contract year are in MIS.
Yes, that was mentioned with the quarters. The quarterly reports are tied into the contract date.
Yeah, and they just have to make sure that they're updating their contract dates in the MIS under their program information.
Okay.
I just wanted to remind that just because sometimes we have site visits and we're running reports, but the current contract year has not been updated, and so that can throw the reports off.
Thank you.
Sure.
Claudia, can we use or borrow the same format, the same pretty blue form that you guys are using?
We're not using the blue form in the text. So in the actual plan, we're using the HFA template, which is right. You can just write right into it.
Okay.
And I will send along our narrative and our plan. So that will be another resource that will be shared with you. I want you all to please keep in mind our narrative is kind of big because it incorporates a couple of years. And it's also for a multi-site system, right? So there's a lot of changes coming in. Just because our narrative is multiple pages doesn't mean yours has to be. As you saw with Babyville, and as you even saw with Virginia's, they fit into these boxes, and these boxes expand as you type, okay? Anyone else? Any questions on the equity plan? Questions on incorporating feedback related to DEI in your existing surveys? All righty. So now on to some housekeeping. SharePoint update. I apologize, this is such a moving target, but I'm getting information from IT and then it changes. So I know there are some of you who reached out to me about your Outlook account. So this is essentially how it works and how we're going to troubleshoot it. If your agency already uses Outlook and you have access to Outlook 365, you can use that Outlook email, it's seeming, to access our accreditation SharePoint site, right? So I know if a number of you already created a different Outlook account, you can put your your agency Outlook account into the spreadsheet and just let me know if you prefer that, right? If you don't use Outlook at all, you use some other kind of interface at work, then you will have to create an Outlook email to access our SharePoint site. If you want to test out to see if you have access to SharePoint, let me know and I can send you a share link. And if you link on it, you log in with your agency email and it works, then perfect. It's great. okay? For whatever reason, RIT thought that existing external agency accounts wouldn't work, but 4 of you proved it does. So that's great. Right, so IT is still building the site, and as soon as it is up and running, I will let you all know. Now I see a couple of questions. Okay, and yeah, Joe, if you want HFA's fillable template along with a sample and network meeting talking about, here it is. Thank you. And Roxanne, I want to test it. Yes. All right, perfect. Just send me, Roxanne and Mongli, send me emails and I will put in your email and share it with you, right? All right, so here's the link. The link will always be there. And what do I need to start doing now? Well, as a reminder, Audre Lorde says, self-care is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. So please remember to take care of yourself. So what have you done? This one's a little tough. You have the 4 policies. You just got policies for 5. So you'll be working on those procedures. And for this one, you're 33% complete. All right, so there's some work to do, but we have time. So by your next office hours, I want you to focus on these words. Review your 4 procedures and think about changes you may need to make. Okay, it's not saying make those changes. Think about them. Begin drafting your procedures for BPS 5. So just think about it, start it, come prepared with questions. They don't have to be complete. Review staff and family surveys to determine if they cover the BPS 5 components that we talked about today. Review your equity plan. If you don't have an equity plan, start thinking about what you would want to put in there. If you want to start filling out the template and just testing it and maybe talking about it with some of your colleagues during office hours, that's a possibility as well. And maybe start thinking about what you will include in your narratives. Okay. As always, please reach out to your accreditation PCM with any questions that cannot wait. Respond to any of your accreditation PCM's requests, whether they're doodle polls or emails or phone calls, etc. Right? I know that if you haven't been able to make it to any office hours, I know that your input would be appreciated. Your perspective would be appreciated during those meetings. So please try to make it. And if you happen to make any tweaks to your policies, these always have to go to your OCFS PCM. They need to approve them, okay? Again, grammatical tweaks, no, but procedural tweaks, yes. So by our May 3rd Accreditation 101, please create a new Outlook account or share your agency Outlook account or test it out with me, right? Have anyone who will be helping you with accreditation watch this recording. Reach out to your accreditation PCM with any questions that can't wait for office hours or 101. Always respond to your accreditation PCM requests. And review finalized HFNY policies for BPS 4 and finalize your procedures for 5. Right, so again, make any necessary changes to site procedures and submit them to your HFNY PCM for review. Review Standard 9 for our next meeting on May 3rd. And it's going to be a back-to-back accreditation review for you all because we're lucky enough that Margaret Gullick from CHSR is going to walk us through the analysis standards that we've done so far at our SLM on May 2nd. Okay, so May 2nd, we're doing analysis standards. May 3rd, we're doing standard 9 and answering any questions you have for the standards that we've gone through so far, 1 through 5. Right? So some questions, Letitia, these slides are on the HFNY site, correct? Yes, the password protected side. You should see a tab along the left-hand side that says accreditation. If you click on that, there is a bar for every 101 we've had thus far. That includes the recording and the PowerPoint slides. Okay. And Trina, are we required to use HFA standardized participant satisfaction survey by adding the DEI questions we wish to include? Are you saying, can you add your own questions to the standard survey?
Yes, I was just wondering if, so we have to use the standardized survey, correct?
No.
It doesn't, we don't?
No, I mean, that's my understanding working at trying to create some of those DEI questions from the HFA work group that I'm on. So we have a number in that we have a number of statewide, number of states represented, and many of those states have generated their own staff surveys. Oftentimes it's easier to just jump off of the example that they give, but my understanding is that HFA does not require that you use the HFA standardized participant satisfaction survey as long as you're getting the information that is required by the standards.
Great, because they don't really match the standards. So thank you. Good.
All right. Yeah. And then Mung Lee, hi Claudia, did you mention there is a back-to-back meeting on May 2nd and May 3rd? Yes, Mung Lee, it's the May 2nd, it's folded into the entire statewide leadership meeting. All right, and then May 3rd is this same kind of format. I hope that helps. All right, so we've got you. Hopefully this works. Tell me if this works. Can you see a Facebook? No? Okay, hold on. Let me stop this. Let me stop sharing. Let me share again. Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. So hopefully it works. You don't really need the audio, but we'll see. You'll get the gist. We've got you. Who doesn't like jumping puppies? He's so brave. All right. So I'll stop sharing now. Any questions, folks? How are you feeling? Are these semi-helpful?
Claudia, I just want to thank you. This is Marlene from Healthy Families
Hi,
Corona.
Marlene.
I'm so sorry because I'm really sick. This is my first accreditation. You know, the program is brand new and I'm a little nervous. But having all this support, I know we got this. I know that I can jump on your on your hands.
Here, I'll catch you.
Yes. But I really, really want to thank you so much because even for me, it's a lot of things that it makes a lot of sense now of the practice and like, oh, I should be paying attention to this. And it's a learning process. It's for me. But thank you so much. You guys make it very simple. Some things that I'm not into that yet, but I know I have Matt around and and he got me. But
Definitely.
thank you so much. Really appreciate this one-on-one. This is the first one that I've seen here personally. I've been viewing and reviewing again and again the recorders, and of course, you know, I keep taking notes and I know I can do this. But thank you.
And one thing I wanted to tell you folks that we did this time that I didn't do for BPS 123 is incorporate those HFNY procedures from the policies. So I'm going to go back to that presentation and include those slides, just so you have them there. All right. Again, repetition. I'm sorry if it's annoying, but sometimes it helps. Oftentimes it helps. All right, folks. So if we don't have any more questions, you get 17 minutes back. Thank you all for coming today. Really appreciate it. And please know that you can reach out to me at any point in time with any questions you may have. And it doesn't matter if it's about, you know, the first presentation, the second, or the fifth, it doesn't matter.
Claudia, can we find, you said we can find the staff survey on the HFA website?
Yes. Yes. Examples should be hyperlinked in the BPS. And let's see. Let's see. I'm waiting for Joe to put it in. I don't mean it, Joe. I don't mean it. Just, you're so on top of everything. But Kara, one thing I want to point out is that HFA recognizes that the template for the participant survey that they have does not, see, there he goes. The participants survey that they have does not meet the BPS 5 requirement as it is now. Okay, so on their end, HFA is working to change that. But you can put in questions. Again, there's some questions from Babyville, so that's interesting. There's some questions from Babyville that could be really useful. We can share resources if any of you have tweaked your survey to better fit BPS 5, then feel free, if you want to, feel free to share, because I know your colleagues will really find it helpful.
That's
Right,
because I can get we have the participant survey, we were surveying family, but the staff.
Oh, you meant the staff survey. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Staff, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, same for staff or participant survey. If you can share whatever you have, that would be great. All right, folks. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.